So what is your story, and how was your upbringing in New York and your transition to Jersey?
So, where do I start? I guess I'll start when I was very, very young. I'm adopted, so I was adopted when I was 13. I do know who my birth parents are, but they were very like my mom was very abusive and like on drugs and just not fit to be a parent. In fact, I was very neglected when I was young, like around like between the ages of like 4 to like 6 years old. Like I was like walking the streets by myself. And I always point to this story when I'm talking about how I became an entrepreneur, just because I really feel like this is where it started for me. And it's this one specific story. I was 6 years old. My grandmother had given me these Louis Vuitton wallets, like just a bunch of like these wallets she didn't no longer use, and she gave it to me just for me to have, like to play with. And I remember I was hungry. My mom, like I said, she was very neglectful. She'd be asleep all day. Like my grandparents weren't always available to watch me. Those were like my second caretakers in addition to my mom, but they were old and like couldn't always watch me. So there was one time I was alone. I was hungry. I had my toys, and those were these wallets. And so I was like, I can sell these wallets and make some money. So what I did was I took this little cardboard box and I set up all the wallets that my grandmother had given me. And I walked into this 99-cent store across the street and started selling these wallets. And I made $11 and I was so hype. The first place I ran to was the Chinese restaurant to get my shrimp fried rice and chicken wings.
Okay, okay.
And I feel like that was my beginning as an entrepreneur. I took something that I had and I sold it and I made some money out of it to get what I needed. So yeah, so I started like that. I was in foster care for a little bit, but I was lucky enough to be in touch with an ex-girlfriend of my biological father. Um, this gets a little complicated. All right, I have to explain it like the right way. So my real father was with my real mother at one point. They were married, had me, then they split up. My mother then found this boyfriend and she was with him from when I was 3 years old. Now, this boyfriend was like very, very abusive. Like he used to really. Have you ever read A Child Called It? The book A Child Called It? My story is very similar to that, so like I encourage you to read it because it's very interesting because like child abuse is not something that's talked about in detail so much, but it's like when you hear about it, it's like fuck, like it really gets you to thinking. So yeah, so her boyfriend was just like very abusive to me. She was then abusive to me as well. They were also on a lot of cocaine, so young people too. They were 21, 22 years old, so yeah, so then my grandparents lived in the same building as my mother and her boyfriend. My father had gone on to start dating other people, and my grandparents were getting old. My grandfather had found out he was getting diagnosed with he got diagnosed with cancer. He knew he only had like a year left to live. So he was just like, I remember foster care was like his biggest fear for me. Like he used to tell me stories. Like he was just like, in foster care, they're gonna starve you. It's that like he had me scared of foster care. And he was scared of foster. He was old. So think about they were kind of like stepping in for my mother when she couldn't. But realistically, like, I mean, they were over 70 years old. My grandfather was like 82 or something like that. Like, so they were very old. They couldn't take care of a toddler. So they did what they could. But when he got diagnosed with cancer, that's when he was just like, okay, I'm not going to be in control of what happens with Amanda anymore. I need to do something about it. So he called social services and they actually came and picked me up. And well, first they sent lawyers into my house and asked me questions. I told them everything that went on. And then they had me removed the very next day. And then my grandfather started freaking out and he called my real father's girlfriend, which they had a child together. So I do have a half brother by blood. And so that was the only other woman that my grandfather knew, and he really respected her because she really like had her head on right. And he was just like, you have to find her. They took her away. You have to find her. Like, where did she go? She's in the system somewhere. You've got to get her. So she I eventually ended up in her care, and like she went through these parenting courses, and like, it's a very complex system when you want to adopt a child. It's really like,
Yeah, I know that system very well because I call him my brother.
mhm.
He now passed.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear
Um,
that.
but yeah, I technically I adopted when I was, you know,
Listen, his mom
Mhm.
was an angel. Like that's
Yeah.
what she did.
Wow.
She took in children like a true angel. Like I'm not just
Wow.
saying, I'm not being biased. Like she took in many children. We've seen a lot of children come in and out.
How many kids did she adopt?
total, she had four, probably like eight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like over time, like she would take them in for some time, and
Mhm.
then they would go back to either relatives
Oh,
or
okay. It's just like a
so
foster.
it
Yeah.
was like in and out.
Mhm.
But the first child that was adopted, I actually adopted him when I was like 22, 23,
Really?
and he was 17, 18, and no, he was 16. And he but not to get into that. I could go into that later
Yeah.
on, but I'll
That's a whole story within itself.
It gets really complicated when the
but I know
system
the
gets
system. Yeah,
involved.
the
Yeah.
system is. It's like even heaters. Like heaters have to be covered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Uh-huh. The
very.
windows have to have gates on. Like
Yeah.
my mom, my adoptive mom had to give up like her bedroom, which wasn't a thing. She never complained about it at all, but like just because like it had windows, and like we in her apartment she had another bedroom, just didn't have windows in it. But because like the agency made sure, like they were just like, you need to have, she needs to be in a room with windows. So she gave up her bedroom so that I could be in a
Yeah.
room with windows.
Yeah, that's
So,
how it is.
yeah, it's a very strict system. But
So your brother's girlfriend adopted you. That's what you were.
my father's ex-girlfriend, which is the mother of my brother, they had a child together. She
she
adopted
adopted,
me.
yeah.
Yeah. So my mom tried to get me back. But she was absolutely psychotic. Like, I mean, she wanted me to say that I lied about my experiences as a child, which is like, why would I make things up? Like, I'm an 8-year-old child. I'm, asked about treatment that I faced when I was a kid, and I'm telling the truth, and she was telling me that I'm lying. So she, I guess, tried to get me back, but failed. So the adoption was finalized when I was 13. And I was adopted by my adoptive mom, which is my father's ex-girlfriend. And then she remarried. So her husband adopted me. And then they just raised me through my teens.